Hi, everyone. I just wanted to share a little exciting news with you before we jump into today's episode, because I recently found out that my book called Building the Practice of Your Dreams, 1 month of daily tips for finding success, actually went to #1 on the Amazon Kindle bestseller list for law firm marketing. And I was honestly blown away. I had no idea. I had no expectation when I put it on Amazon Kindle. I really just wanted to make sure it was available to as many people as possible. So to find out that in the first month it went to #1, that anybody bought it or downloaded it, completely blows my mind. But so I was super excited. I wanted to let you know that it's available. It's only $4.99 on Kindle. You can get a copy at neonly.biz-book. So that's neon.ly/biz-book. So go ahead, get a copy. Let me know what you think of it. I've got the second one in the works already. And now let's dive into today's episode.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
We cannot think ourselves well. But thinking was always my front line of defense, right? It's like how I coped as a very young person in the traumatic environment. And so I couldn't think myself out of cluster headaches. I couldn't think myself out of getting divorced. And it's when I really committed myself personally to this sort of rebirth and was like, I am going to do whatever it takes to never have to feel this kind of pain again.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today's episode is truly something special. If you're someone who's ever felt like the traditional paths of healing and recovery after a life-altering event like divorce haven't fully addressed your needs, then this is the conversation for you. Joining me today is the incredible Dawn Wiggins. Dawn is a licensed marriage and family therapist who has taken her traditional therapy background to a whole new level. Dawn is an integrative healer who combines a wide range of modalities from somatic work to homeopathy, EMDR, human design, and much more to help her clients heal not just their minds, but their bodies and spirits as well. In this episode, Dawn shares her personal journey from a chaotic childhood and early challenges as a therapist to discovering the holistic approach that she now uses to guide others toward true, lasting healing. We're going to dive into why traditional methods sometimes fall short, the importance of addressing trauma on every level, and how her holy grail approach can create what she calls juicy wellness. This is an eye-opening, mind-blowing conversation packed with insights, hopes, and tools you can start using today. Plus, Dawn has a special offer for you, including a free post-divorce roadmap that you don't want to miss. So settle in and get ready to challenge the status quo with Dawn Wiggins on today's Divorce and Beyond. Dawn, I'm just so happy to have you with me today to help my listeners understand this idea of challenging the status quo. So thank you so much for joining me.
I've been looking forward to this. So I'm super excited to be here and for us to blow their minds.
Yeah, well, and that's actually what I think it will do in some ways. And that's why I'm so excited to bring this to people, because immediately when you and I connected in the beginning, so much of what you said made complete sense to me and filled holes that I, as a divorce professional, know are there, but didn't know someone who had managed to make all the connections. So, having you here to do that, I think is really critical for people.
That's like all the validation I needed, friend.
Yeah. Well, And good, because that is what I want. My listeners know that one of the most important things to me is to bring them the information that they need in the
That they
space
need.
where they are, right? And
Yeah.
so often traditional methods of recovery and healing and, dealing with trauma aren't as effective as people want them to be, although they can be, but they often are missing something. And that's really the space that you've come to. So
Yes.
I thought the best thing, because it helped me so much to understand, was to hear some of your backstory, how you came to this place, because you started out as a pretty traditional LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist.
Marriage and family therapist. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Let's dive in maybe there.
The first thing I'm going to say is, too often when we're not making progress in some area of our life, our tendency, I think, especially women, our tendency is to fall back to, it must just be me. I must just be doing something wrong. And really what we're going to unpack and what I'm going to speak about in my story is that that's rarely the case. It's like there's a missing process. There's something else out there that you can reach for, right? It's not that it's something wrong with you. It's that there is more, and don't just settle for that, right? So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a therapist, and that probably was born out of I'm living in my gifts, but also I had a very chaotic, traumatic childhood, and my parents were in couples counseling, marriage counseling. It did not work, which is probably where I very first got the idea that I wonder if marriage counseling actually works, because it didn't help at all, right? And so they never included me in that, which is also probably why I was drawn to family therapy, because I felt like, gosh, I was sort of suffering all of this alone. And if I could just explain to them and the professional, maybe something would change. And so none of that ever happened. And I think that I know that there was codependency that got in there, right? Like if I could help all the children not have to feel and experience what I went through. Fast forward, I went to college, graduated early, had chronic illness, brewing, untreated trauma, was very, very clear that I was, hell-bent on this path to therapist. Ended up getting my license in marriage and family therapy because I really appreciated the systems thinking concept, that every part of a system influences every other part of the system. So that if one person makes changes, the whole system is going to be affected, right? Which is P.S. what happens when people start to set boundaries.
Yeah.
It influences the entire system, right? So very early on, I just sort of had this sense. Got married very young, right? Like 21, 22. And again, chronic disease brewing. And just thought that marriage was going to solve all of my underlying emotional and mental health issues. But it did not. I know. And I came to understand very quickly as a practicing marriage and family therapist that that's a lot of what goes on when folks are getting married, is that they're expecting the marriage to solve problems for them without solving them first and then selecting a partner. And so ended up, 27 years old, getting diagnosed with cluster headaches, and just all this chronic illness really popped to the surface. By 29, 30 years old, we were in the process of divorce. And I didn't have this horrible high conflict divorce with kids. Actually, I had experienced a lot of infertility, and that was probably contributing to it. The demise of the marriage, that was surely probably part of it, right? As a 30-year-old divorced, promised myself I would never get divorced, obviously, right? It became very clear that I had missed some things. And started to tune into this idea that has become more mainstream now, that Bessel van der Kolk or Gabor Mate, some of our medical experts in trauma, right, have told us we cannot think ourselves well. But thinking was always my front line of defense, right? It's like how I coped as a very young person in the traumatic environment. And so I couldn't think myself out of cluster headaches. I couldn't think myself out of getting divorced. And it's when I really committed myself personally to this sort of rebirth, and was like, I am going to do whatever it takes to never have to feel this kind of pain again. I have stuck with that mantra, right? Like, I didn't come this far to come this far. This is not where my story is going to end. I'm going to win. I am highly competitive.
There might be a type A in there.
Every time I've hit some sort of what I would call wall, either for my clients and patients or myself, maybe heard that voice in the back of my mind. Well, gosh, is this all there is? Like, maybe it's me. But then always managed to push through that and say, there must be more. And I think that that optimism is just sort of something that's in me. But I also think that as I study sort of history and spiritual texts and whatever, and I started to see, and this was all part of my own recovery process, right? But as I started to see like where the fulcrum point was in yoga or the 12 steps or in various religions or whatever, right? You start to see like, no, there are consistently promises that we are supposed to be happy and fulfilled and aligned, and that is supposed to be available. And if it's supposed to be available, then I'm going to have it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stop until I do. Yeah. And so that often led me to kind of pushing the envelope in therapy, right? Like, let me push past what they taught me in grad school. Let me push past what maybe I learned in a training. Let me push into what feels like it would move the needle here. Let me try new things. I love trying new things in human design. If you've ever studied or looked into human design, I'm a quick start, right? I'm a quick start. I'm a 6. I just iterate. And so that's when I started really pulling in some different modalities to even marriage counseling, just started creating massive change for people and myself, and just kind of haven't stopped until I feel like I found what I would call the holy grail of healing.
Yeah. Well, and that's where we're going to dive in. But, I found it so interesting when we talked, you just said we cannot think ourselves well. And you had also made a comment about, talk therapy. Is that effective for healing what's within? And you just mentioned the 12 steps. And it made me think of friends I've had in recovery who have said to me that as they've been on their journey to sobriety, et cetera, that continuing to go to 12-step meetings has actually been detrimental to them because every day it brought them back into that
I am an alcoholic.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
And for me, that's where, I've heard that from so many of them. And family members of mine. And so when you were saying this about those seeking help with relationships, those seeking healing from trauma, et cetera, it made so much sense to me. It was like, oh my God, somebody just flipped on a light bulb for me and has started to find the path that actually might help in recovery. So that's when I say you're sort of challenging that status quo. That's what was so appealing to me, is I think the lack has always been there. And I'm not saying that talk cannot be helpful, but it does seem that there's a missing link there, or links.
Yeah, I think that talk is very helpful. Just the other day I was on a walk with my girlfriend and we were walking around the library doing laps, and I was articulating things that maybe I'm usually kind of internalized about. And gosh, I heard myself saying things I had never said before, and it was so good, right? But we were walking and talking. So again, it wasn't just sitting and talking, right? There's this somatic element, there's this movement to it. And so I think talking can be very helpful, but I also think we have to acknowledge that we are evolving, that what worked 30 years ago, 10 years ago, pre-COVID, is not going to work today. I have seen, and I think if you talk to a lot of healers, whether they're chiropractors or they're naturopaths or they're therapists, they will tell you that cases are getting more complex. There are more layers of disease to unwind than ever before. And so that's a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah.
But I think that needs to be acknowledged, that there are multiple reasons why traditional modalities are limiting. As therapy became more popular, I think we churned out more master's level clinicians that are not as trained or educated or skilled as historically maybe, somebody who was doing psychoanalysis that had much more training, who had much more education. I think we churned out a crap load of therapists. And what if they didn't get trained well enough to really treat the complexity of the case that we have today? I think there are a lot of factors that explain why. But I have sure had a blast in my career kind of pushing the envelope about what works and what doesn't work. And I'm willing to validate this doesn't work. That, for everyone listening to your podcast, I would guess most of them at some point tried couples counseling.
Yeah.
And felt like it didn't work. That doesn't mean that couples counseling can't work, but in its current format, it rarely does.
Right. And that's what I think will resonate with so many people. And think again, I just want everyone to realize whether it's couples counseling that we're talking about or a different type of therapy that you've tried and you just felt like it didn't, get you to where you want to be, you've evolved into a place where I don't think it's just one modality that you're talking about anymore.
That's right. That's right.
And you said you sort of have evolved into a holy grail sort of approach. So let's go there. Again, you come from that traditional LMFT background and you've taken that to a whole new level. Talk about an overachiever, really. You've gone out and gotten training in a variety of different areas. So your toolbox is very full.
Yeah. It's interesting when people come to me, I often am recommending particular supplements or, homeopathic remedies or flower essences. I am often referring people to chiropractors. I am often wanting to co-care cases with these multiple modalities. And I think that's essential because, yes, what I'm going to refer to as the Holy Grail is we cannot continue to silo, separate these various ways of healing. We can't separate the mind from the body from the spirit, right? So when I work with people, I am addressing every layer of that. And most therapists aren't trained to do that, right? They're meant to stay in their lane to sort of deal with, how you think and how you feel. But so much of that is wrapped up in the body, in the cells of our bodies, right? So I have added modalities that emphasize the somatic approach where we are feeling through the memories that we're unpacking or the future plans we're building. I have added modalities like EMDR therapy, which uses, a deep understanding and sort of a re-experiencing of trauma, but in a way where you're feeling into it in the body. I have added things like human design, where we're adding astrology, basically, right? And understanding, well, what is your design? So many of us, I think we get on social media and we compare ourselves to somebody else. And then we are not dialed into, I can't be somebody else. And I have to know what my design is, how I function optimally. I have to know it, and then I have to accept it, and then I have to live into it. Adding astrology, adding EMDR therapy, adding homeopathy or some functional medicine, right? Where we're adding some energy medicines, where we're adding some supplements to support the body. We're addressing nervous system health and not just from let's make sure we're using somatic techniques like humming or noticing, is my nervous system in green or yellow or red state, but like actually supporting the body by giving it the nutrition and nutrients it needs. So really this whole person approach that, I think so many people, they go to therapy and they, do a dozen sessions and it helps so much and they feel supported, but they end up venting more than anything and then hitting all these walls in terms of actually implementing and embracing a new, truly different life. And then they end up attracting a partner that is in essence going to have the same outcome. And then they get divorced again and again and again. Gosh, I just want people to know like that doesn't have to be your path.
Hey everyone, it's Susan. So look, we know going through a divorce is tough and self-care can easily get overlooked. I wanted to share something that helped me, and that was creating a cozy space to relax. Something that can help you is Parachute Home, which is bedding and home goods that bring real comfort. Imagine ending your day wrapped in the softest sheets or a warm blanket. So if you're looking to add a bit of peace to your home, visit divorcebeyond.com/parachute. When you shop through my link, it supports the podcast, and you know how much I appreciate that. So remember, taking care of yourself is a big step forward. So check out Parachute Home and get yourself your own warm, cozy hug. We're going to take a quick break now for a promo, but I just want to remind you to stick around because the best is yet to come. In the second half of this episode, Dawn dives into her groundbreaking Holy Grail approach to healing, how she integrates mind, body, and spirit for transformational results, and why breaking old patterns doesn't have to feel impossible. Plus, she'll share some incredible insights into how similar suffering can actually be a path to recovery. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
You're still going to attract someone who's going to have the same level of unresolved shit that you do. And then what are you going to do with that together? And so when I'm looking at what a healthy relationship is. It's not a relationship with no problems. It's a relationship with two people who are willing to be vulnerable enough to tackle their similar suffering together.
Hey listeners, if you find this episode to be helpful, I want you to be sure to check out last week's show with my special guest, Karis Nafty. Karis is a pet custody mediator and certified dog behavior consultant. And in the episode, she's going to be sharing everything you need to know about how your divorce can impact your furry friends and what you can do to protect them. And be sure to listen all the way to the end of the episode because Karis has a special offer on her pet custody course, which is designed to help you protect your animal companions in your divorce.
You're not considering your dog. You're not seeing the situation through their eyes. And that's really hard, but you can do it. And that's when the sort of most correct decision for the dog is there, if you dig for it.
And now we return to today's show.
This holistic approach that you're talking about, it makes me think about, I always say, and I've said in a variety of episodes, because I do feel like awareness of your issues, of why things have happened or why you keep repeating patterns. Awareness is the key to everything, but it's really the first step. And that's where I feel like therapy is your friend. Therapy
that's absolutely right.
Yeah, it helps you with the awareness. And
Bingo.
we can feel a lot better in the moment when we're like, oh my God, yes, I have a pattern.
Right.
I do this. But what it doesn't do is then give you all
a new pattern.
Yes. Right. And just, help you deal with the underlying trauma of why you got to that pattern and, et cetera. So one of the things I really found interesting because it was a bit perhaps antithetical to what you would suppose is that you were describing homeopathy and you said that it is essentially a remedy for trauma and it's based in similar suffering, which made no sense to me at all until you explained it. So I'm going to ask you to explain it to my listeners.
Yes. Okay. So this idea of similar suffering, which is what the word homeopathy means in Latin, we can track it back all the way through time and space, right? We can see throughout history where people have acknowledged that similar suffering is a really remarkable way to heal. And even in Western medicine, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, has talked about similar suffering in some of his texts. So we have incorporated that even into some of our Western medicine. It's just not grounding our medical approach, right? So what's an example of similar suffering in Western medicine? It would be like using a stimulant to treat ADHD, right? It's like when someone is overstimulated and they're just tending to be in that state, right? And we give them a stimulant, it actually calms them. So that's an example of a homeopathic approach using, a pharmaceutical. Similar suffering it feels antithetical, right?
Absolutely.
It feels antithetical. So the way that it sort of the father of homeopathy stumbled across it was the late 1700s, and Samuel Hahnemann, he was studying to be a doctor. He was this brilliant guy. He spoke like 11 languages or something like that. Really, really smart. And he was studying in Leipzig and Vienna, and he wanted to become this sort of preeminent doctor. But they were doing a lot of bloodletting and leeches, and some of it worked sometimes, but rarely is bloodletting going to actually help anyone get stronger and have more robust health, right? And so he was questioning their science, like, where is the science to back up some of these modalities that you're using? But the more that he sort of studied and looked at things, there was one place where he said, there's something to this. And that was the way they were treating malaria at the time. They were using a tincture made of a plant called cinchona bark. It was really, really successful in helping treat malaria. And so he said to himself, well, I don't have malaria. What happens if I ingest a bunch of cinchona bark? And he did so. And he immediately, I know, right? Trust your crazy ideas. And he immediately developed the symptoms of malaria without actually contracting it. So then, right, like he had an itch in his brain that he could not help but scratch and say, like, well, is this happening all through nature? Like, are there matching natural products that match disease patterns? And that was the birthplace of homeopathy. So you can use homeopathy. I think most people have heard of it when they maybe there's a really common flu remedy you can pick up at like Target or whatever, like azacitidine. Yep. At the health food store, you pick up an arnica cream for your bruise.
Yep.
And that's homeopathy for acute cases, right? Like something is happening right now, and I need something to help stimulate healthy healing. The way I use homeopathy in my practice is called constitutional homeopathy, and it looks at the totality of your case through your entire timeline. What traumas and experiences have you gone through from conception to today? And what is the matching remedy in nature for the totality of your symptoms? What are your big picture patterns?
Right.
And what is the matching remedy? And what is so amazing about it is it can reach back through your timeline. It's energy medicine, right? So it's harnessing quantum physics, which we are just sort of starting to understand when we look at how yoga can lengthen our telomeres and what is it about the quantum body that helps us actually create more longevity, which is what happens when you lengthen a telomere. We have longer, healthier lifespan, right? We understand there's something to do about quantum field there, but we're only really starting to kind of make sense of it, right? But that's what homeopathy does. And it is the thing that ultimately got me across what I would say the finish line, or when like everything sort of clicked into place for me about how whole healing is possible. I've seen it repair attachment styles. I have seen it repair dissociation. So for all those people that have even tried EMDR therapy, they're like, hey, Susan, it's great that you have this lady Dawn on and that she's using EMDR therapy and she thinks it's cutting edge, but I've tried it and it didn't work for me. Well, right. But I do it and I add a couple of well-paired remedies. And then the dissociation that was blocking the EMDR from being effective all of a sudden is moved out of the way. And now we can actually do the work. So it's not any one tool, to your point. You said that, right? And it's this marriage of all of these things that we are now coming to understand and putting all those pieces together to create just really, really juicy wellness.
Yeah. Juicy wellness. Who doesn't love that? That's what I love. What resonates with me is that in another aspect of what I do in this world is I train mediators. And one of the things that I do when we train mediators is we don't teach them one skill for helping people communicate well and have difficult conversations. We teach them a myriad of tools and strategies, and a good mediator continues to learn those tools and strategies and get more and more over the course of their career. And so we're always talking about the full toolbox, and the skill is knowing which one to pull out.
Which one, that's right.
Yeah. And when one's not working, putting it back and knowing the next one to try.
And not just hammering down, right?
Exactly. Hammer is a good one. I see what you did there. And the other thing, I don't want to lose this because it's a little funny. So when you're talking about similar suffering, everyone out there, what Dawn is not talking about is going out there and getting a similar relationship to the last one that failed, so that you just keep that's not the similar suffering.
Don't make a welly. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. She's talking about a holistic approach where the similar suffering is coming from a different place or a different modality than the trauma or the issue that is being
I'm actually going to take what you said and then I'm going to turn it on its head a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. Okay. All right. I didn't see this coming in this episode, but here we go.
Sorry.
Super interesting. So actually, I think that is the design. I think, our bodies were designed to heal themselves. I believe in an intelligent creator that created, this really remarkable world, and it has all these healing things in it, and the body knows how to heal itself. Now, Western medicine wouldn't have you say that because you can't profit off of a body that can heal itself. Okay.
Yes.
But I think we attract our partners from a subconscious place. And we think we're doing it consciously, but we're not. There's so much in our early childhood brain map that's really dictating, right? And we know from the quantum study that like calls to like. That's how magnets work. This is just how it works, right? Like calls to like. And so we attract our romantic partners from that place. We attract everything from that, like a subconscious, energetic place. Now, when two people in a marriage have a boatload of problems, I believe that similar suffering, that there is never a hero and a villain in a marriage that's coming unglued. And I think that as women, we sort of got into a disempowered place where we started to feel like victims and like husbands were the problem and wives were maybe less the problem, but that's just not true, right? It's always equal. It is always, always, always equal. And I believe that the design is that we were supposed to mutually assist each other in facing, whether we call them those demons or those vulnerabilities, right? And we were supposed to alchemize or transmute that energy within that pairing. Because it is that similar suffering. We are always going to attract another person with a similar vibrational suffering. And within that relationship, we can either choose to do that work together and rise, or we can choose to throw in the towel and say, it's not worth it. And I think that many people choose it's not worth it, but I actually think most of us don't know how.
Yeah.
I think most people don't know how and don't feel like they're well-resourced or supported enough. So even in your subsequent dating relationships and your, second, third partners, like you're still going to attract someone who's going to have the same level of unresolved shit that you do.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do with that together? And so when I'm looking at what a healthy relationship is, it's not a relationship with no problems. It's a relationship with two people who are willing to be vulnerable enough to tackle their similar suffering together. Can you solve your suffering by picking another crappy relationship? No, but maybe you could, right? Maybe you could if the two people were willing to tackle those things together.
Well, maybe it's the vehicle to helping you, move into that space. Going full circle to what you said at the very beginning, right? You said people may want to tackle these problems together, but they don't know how. And very often what they do is they go to traditional marriage therapy. And so it's sort of full circle of what we're talking about here,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
Only addressing one modality. That's why perhaps so many people who do go to marriage counseling don't find it to be sufficient to heal the relationship.
When so many people call me for marriage counseling, they say they need a unbiased third party to help mediate their conversations. AKA, I need someone to help me blame my partner.
Fix them.
That's right. And so anytime we are using blame, and Brene Brown taught us this, right? Blame is just a way of us discharging our own pain and discomfort. We've convinced ourselves that we are not the problem. Anytime we're using blame in any relationship, we've convinced ourselves that we are not the problem. And if I've learned anything in my multiple decades of being a clinician, it's that because similar suffering, because like is attracted to like, I am always going to be part of the problem. And my ability and willingness to look at my blind spots, it's what's going to give me the least suffering in life, the least amount of suffering. Let's say I help someone go from this crisis, right, to this healing place. What the healing place always ends up looking like is self-acceptance, self-love and self-acceptance. And then from that place, it is so much easier to just accept and love other people for who they are. From that place of self-acceptance and self-validation, they have a more secure attachment style. Therefore, they don't get all their panties in a twist about when somebody else is got other dreams, goals, and aspirations, and they can tolerate some healthy separation in relationship, right? Self-acceptance is always the birthplace of wellness.
Yes.
And we have all these diagnoses for narcissists and cluster B personality, whatever, right? We have all these titles, but it's all really just boils down to a lack of self-acceptance. And how that looks in the body, like how those symptoms look like in the body, it can look like rheumatoid arthritis. It can look like neck and back problems. It can look like digestive issues. It can look like so many things, but that's what drives the bulk of disease. Like do we have disease because we have environmental toxins? Absolutely. Do we have disease because we inherited some stuff genetically? Absolutely. But guess what? I've watched constitutional homeopathy unwind that inherited genetic stuff.
Right.
Healing really comes down to self-acceptance. And when you have a relationship between two people who can love themselves and love each other well, that's beautiful.
It is. And it starts with none of us really, I don't know that any person on this planet is ready and able to be in that space without some help to get there.
I can't imagine.
It's right. Who gets through life
without the hero's journey, without that dark night of the soul?
Thank you.
Yes, that's right.
It's so no shame in needing help. I think the key here is getting all the help that you need, getting that holistic approach. And that's, this is exciting stuff for me because I've done this podcast now for, 5-6 years, and I have talked about trauma healing here in one silo. I've talked about EMDR. I've talked about therapy. I've talked with people about this, and I love all of them. And I think there's value in all of that. But you are the first person I've spoken to who has brought everything together sort of under one umbrella, and not in a cookie cutter way, but in a, look, there's a lot of different tools to be used and they all work together. And that's what I think, I want people to know that there's hope, because one of the things that's so difficult is rarely do people reach out for help when things are going great, right? They're reaching out for help when things are going wrong. And then when the help doesn't help,
it's so overwhelming. It's so overwhelming
and discouraging and discouraging at a time when we're already discouraged. So in this episode, and in what you do for people, I think there's ultimately a message of great hope.
Yes. I mean, that's why I started working and specializing in working with divorced women beyond, my work in marriage and family therapy, because it was that dark night of the soul for me that inspired me to really get my crap together, and admit what I didn't know. Divorce is always a symptom. It's never the problem. It's always a symptom. I designed a coaching program last year and just rolled it out for the first time this year. We're running it for the first time, where I implement all of these things in one long coaching program. Because I do think that for me as a healer, it's one thing for me to have learned and incorporated all these things because it's my life's work. It's easy for me to say let me go to a chiropractor and let it be a write-off, and let me learn about chiropractic and why that's necessary for people who are dissociative and anxious and depressed and have, intermittent suicidal thoughts. What does that have to do? Right. But it's easy for me to throw myself in. I don't think it's easy for the average person to immerse themselves in all of these different healing modalities. I think that when you're getting divorced and you're a single parenting or half single parenting or whatever, and you're trying to juggle the finances and all the things, it absolutely feels so overwhelming that your nervous system just can't handle the idea of having to tackle all of these modalities. That's right.
That's why having a professional who can help you, sort of down that path, which is so wonderful, why you're here, why you have your program. And in fact, you have a special offer for my listeners, and you have a post-divorce roadmap that you are giving to people.
Yeah. So this is fun. It's an immersive journaling program that I put together. We are just this holiday season, running a free promo for people to download it. It's a 21-day immersive journaling program. What does that mean? I give you all the prompts, It's each of the 21 prompts is in an order for a reason. And I'm sort of drawing you into this somatic journey where I'm helping you learn how to add somatics, body awareness to your journaling process. I have a little training program. There's a musical playlist because that helps balance the brain. It's like bringing in all these modalities just within a journaling space, There's mirror messages, there's some homeopathic recommendations and some flower essences recommendations. So it's this sort of wraparound journaling system that is free during this holiday season for your listeners.
This episode is coming out the week of Thanksgiving. And as we go into the holiday season, everyone, one of the reasons why I'm so happy to get this episode out here at this time of year is just to add on top of any other stressors you may have. Ho, 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 the holiday season can be one of the most stressful times of the year for people. We also have other things going on in the world that are bringing a lot of stress into our lives. So I'm going to recommend everybody reach out and download the roadmap. We'll have a link to it in the show notes. And then you also have a coupon code for listeners.
Yes, the coupon code is email friends so that we can be friends on email. Yeah. So when you're downloading the post-divorce roadmap, use that code email friends, you'll have to download the Heartbeat app and all that techie stuff, but it's so worth it. Yeah.
You guys can handle the techie stuff. We're techies. You can handle it. Well, Dawn, I'm so delighted that we had an opportunity to talk about this. I always love it when someone has managed to find the secret sauce of something and that they then take that and use it to continue to help others, which clearly you are doing, and you were willing to step outside, sort of traditional boundaries in a world that doesn't always reward that alternative approaches. So I greatly appreciate your doing that. Now I'm going to throw a little curveball at you here at the very end. And I am starting a new podcast in the new year, one of my little passion projects, and it's called the Turns Out Podcast. And it's because everyone that I ever talk to tells me a story that it turns out something in their life or something that has happened, it turns out it wasn't the worst thing, it was the best thing, or whatever that is. So I wonder on the spot if you can think of a turns out message for my listeners.
Ooh. Well, first of all, congratulations on the new endeavor. That is very exciting. I think that my turns out is, gosh, it might feel too big to tackle, right? But I think that the thing that I have learned back to self-acceptance, right, is that turns out I am way more powerful than I thought, right? That you, Susan, are way more powerful than you thought. Your listeners are way more powerful than they thought. And anytime I'm thinking or they are thinking that they cannot craft their life in such a way that is meaningful and purposeful and feels good, turns out they had it completely backwards. Anytime they're having the thought that something outside of them is causing them to not have what they want, turns out the opposite is true, that they are limiting themselves in some way, that I was limiting myself. Turns out, loves, you have the keys to the jail cell and you didn't know it all along.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for jumping into the turns out. That is beautiful. And I may have to use that as a promo for the new podcast. And maybe you want to come on the new show, because I really want to bring hope and insights to everyone, not those, not just those that go through divorce. I really love my divorce community, but I feel like so much of what we talk about here on a divorce podcast could help everyone. And so that's what Turns Out's for. So thank you so much for diving into that. You did a beautiful job. There's a lot of wonderful Turns Out thoughts right in there. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for sharing what you have learned in your journey with my listeners. And most of all, thank you for helping them to move into the life that the beyond that they all want and deserve. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.